Welcome back. Now 11:01 as we continue our coverage of Hurricane Irene.
Here's some more dramatic video. Storm surge on the Crystal Coast, pushing water inland. This is video from Atlantic Beach as the water quickly rises at the Atlantic Beach inlet. Many homes are now underwater. Also, a live look at Nags Head by a broadband from Breaking News 1. Hurricane Irene still that Category 1 storm. The Outer Banks now under the gun as Irene moves north-northeast. We've seen the gusts around 96 miles an hour. The storm surge continuing to push water inland.
I want to show you the satellite loop now of Irene as it continues to push its way north there along the Outer Banks and moving up. Soon going to be in Virginia, then headed up toward New Jersey and New York, and those folks are on high alert. Still a big storm with high winds extending into the Triangle. There are reports of damage across numerous counties. Also, power outages scattered across eastern North Carolina. We're getting totals of more than 300,000. Good morning. Irene made landfall around 7:30 this morning near Cape Lookout.
But this hurricane is far from over. The effects of the storm could last for hours.
We are awaiting an update from FEMA officials. This is a live look at the podium in Washington, D.C. This will be the first update from the federal government since the storm came ashore. We will take you there live when this begins. As we await that news conference, let's get an update from meteorologist Don Schwinneker in the First Alert Storm Center. Don?
Well, John and Barbara, good morning to you. Those power outages continuing to spread through the Triangle. Just got a call from my wife. Power's out in Holly Springs, so there's one of the spots you might see a power outage as you head out throughout the day. Satellite picture continuing to show this storm as it moves off to the north and east. We put it into motion. It almost looks like it's wobbling back to the west, but it's kind of an optical illusion. It's drawing in a bunch of dry air on the back side of it. So the heaviest part of the shower activity now rotating to the west, the dry part rotating to the east. And it makes it look like it's wobbling, but we've got the latest plot in from the National Hurricane Center. They just updated this as of 11 o'clock, and here's what we know. As of 11 o'clock, maximum sustained winds are 85 miles an hour. Winds out of the northeast at 14 miles an hour. It's moving northeast. So here's the latest path of the storm. It does take it west of Kill Devil Hills, the center of the storm, the east of Elizabeth City. We know that as it progresses off to the north and east. By 8 o'clock tonight, it is a distant memory here as it moves through the Delmarva Peninsula, just off the Delmarva Peninsula and on toward the east coast. Warnings from around the region right now, looking at some flash flood warnings. Roanoke Rapids, Rocky Mount, Goldsboro, as much as 5 inches of rain has fallen in some of those areas. Those are Doppler radar estimates, but that's going to be a problem for you. We have flash flood watches in effect running from the north of here all the way down into Wake County. That does include the city of Raleigh. Let's talk about the winds. Wind advisory in effect through this evening, and that runs from the Virginia border down through Raleigh and into Fayetteville. Counties included in that wind advisory: Granville, Vance, Warren, Franklin, Harnett, Cumberland, and Wake County. And then the high wind warning in effect for Halifax, Nash, Edgecombe, Wilson, Johnston, Wayne County, and Sampson County. That includes places like Goldsboro, Rocky Mount, Roanoke Rapids. Wind gusts over 50 miles an hour possible. We've had a report of a 60-mile-an-hour wind gust as we work through from Goldsboro just within the past hour. Backside of the storm now hitting Beaufort. They're up to 66 miles an hour as far as wind gusts go. 54 miles an hour in Wilmington. Oak Island's down into the 40s. We slide north. Hatteras is at 71. 51 miles an hour in Manteo. 38 in Currituck. Look at Rocky Mount, Wilson, still at 60. The latest report now, 63-mile-an-hour wind gusts in Rocky Mount and Wilson at the airport. 59 Goldsboro. 36 in Raleigh. 35 Smithfield. 31 in Oxford. The latest the latest radar picture, Doppler radar, coming to us out of Raleigh, Durham first, and you can see the heavy showers, the yellow areas from Rocky Mount to Wilson and Goldsboro. Those are pressing east, put it into motion, or pressing west from the east, put it into motion. You can see them all wrapping around. We're getting what's called training, where you have one area of showers work across an area that's already worked through. It's called training because each area of showers is kind of like a car in a train. You get one boxcar moves through, then the next one, all of those boxcars full of rain showers. Slide to the south and look at what's going on along the coast. And Morehead City actually done with the heaviest rain showers right now after seeing some very heavy rainfall earlier. One last little batch rotating through put this one into motion. You can see the eye rotating north across Cedar Island and moving on to the north and east. The heavier showers from Fairfield Harbor back toward Jacksonville, Rose Hill, Wilmington, the western edge of Wilmington, actually with some dry air trying to work in there. We'll slide up. A little bit of dry slot working across Hatteras and Nags Head. Heavier showers now from Plymouth to Greenville to Rocky Mount and Roanoke Rapids. All of those showers continuing to press off to the west. Let's talk a little bit about what else we're seeing for that. Meteorologist Steve Stewart is here. We'll check with meteorologist Steve Stewart coming up in just a couple of minutes. Right now, we want to go back to John and Barbara.
All right, Don, thank you.
Let's go now live to Washington, D.C. as FEMA officials address the public.
Gail McGovern from the Red Cross and Major Hood from the Salvation Army. So thank you all for joining us on a Saturday morning. As expected, Hurricane Irene made landfall early this morning along the North Carolina coast. I have spoken with Governor Perdue this morning. She said they were now, quote, hunkered down, close quote. But they are ready to do damage assessments as soon as possible, especially for assets like the bridges and the roads. Irene remains a large and dangerous storm. People need to take it seriously. People need to be prepared. As we have suggested during the week, think of this in 3 phases: preparation, response, and recovery. Some of our states are now moving into the response mode, but other states, as you are further north along the Atlantic seacoast, are still in preparation mode. So if you receive a warning to evacuate, please do so. Even if you haven't received a warning during the storm, please stay inside. Quote, hunker down until the storm passes. Stay off the roads so the roads can be clear for emergency vehicles for our first responders. We anticipate heavy rain, potential flooding, and significant power outages throughout the area of the storm, and which means all up and down the eastern seaboard. So with that, let me turn it over to Bill Reed. He'll give you an update on the storm itself, and then you'll hear from Craig Fugate. Bill?
Thank you, Madam Secretary. I've got on the image here the satellite loop, the visible loop of Irene, the center of which is now about 50 miles to the west of Cape Hatteras, moving to the north-northeast at about 15 miles an hour. The Outer Banks, Nags Head, Outer Banks areas are going to be impacted over the next several hours. Next in line is the Tidewater, Hampton Roads, Norfolk area. They're already having adverse conditions there. I've talked to several relatives in the area where the rainfall has been incredibly heavy and the water levels are coming up now. I'd like to also report a good story coming out of that. The information they've gotten in advance of this storm from the local officials on what to do or not do in the event of this storm has just been outstanding. It fits right in with what they should be doing. Next picture, please. Radar imagery of this. We see these bands coming around the top here. Every now and then, one of those will take on a characteristic on radar that allows our local forecast office to issue tornado warnings on those. They're fast, they're furious. They're not going to give you the long lead time like the big supercell tornadoes that you end up working in the Great Plains like we had back in April across this area. We've had storm surge tides in the upper ends of Pamlico Sound here in the 7.5-foot range. 5 to 9 feet is the forecast, depending on where you are on the upper ends of the sounds here. Storm tides will be high also on the coast, and you add to that the effects of the high waves and the beach erosion and whatnot that's going on out there. It's a very dangerous time if anyone's left out on the islands. Heavy rain, a large area has been getting rain since late yesterday afternoon. We're going to see 5 to 10 and maybe some isolated 15 inches across North Carolina before the storm exits there later today. Next slide, please. Here's the latest forecast track with some wind field information on it. By late this evening, it should be moving past, the center should be moving past the Norfolk area. The winds will be east, then northeast and north, and then around the northwest as the storm comes past Norfolk. I'm sure we'll see hurricane-force wind gusts through a lot of locations there. The sustained winds may be mostly over the water with the now saturated grounds, those kind of winds. Remember Isabel, we had a lot of tree damage in that area. I expect we'll see reports in that regard in that area also. Then this evening, overnight hours, it's going to go right along the coast of the Delmarva, past places like Ocean City and Rehoboth, impacting the Delaware Bay with storm surge and high winds. And then by early morning, being near Cape May, New Jersey, moving up the coastline of New Jersey, affecting all the resort areas in New Jersey during the morning hours. And then making its next big landfall across Long Island into New England, very near New York City. I don't want you to get too carried away with that exact point on there. As you saw in the radar and satellite imagery, the center is not a tight little eye. It's a broad area right now of hurricane-force winds, and we're going to keep hurricane-force winds in the forecast for at least for now, right up through final landfall into New England. Next slide, please. The tropical storm wind probabilities, as we talked about for several days now, this gives you an idea of how large an area is going to be likely to be impacted by at least tropical storm force winds while Irene makes its trek up the eastern seaboard. And wherever those tropical storm force winds last for hours and we have the saturated ground, that's the areas we're going to be focusing on for the wind damage that is associated with trees coming down and the like. Next slide, please. This is our probability of storm surge gauged off a 4-foot exceedance. So if you're going to get higher than a 4-foot storm surge out of it, right now, the highest probability storm surge, as you might expect, is where it's actually happening. Also want to point out the likelihood of exceeding 4 feet in the upper ends of the streams that come into the James River and then the Chesapeake and the ocean in the Norfolk, Hampton Roads area. And then some parts of the lower Chesapeake have a chance. The upper Chesapeake on this track in our current forecast is not looking like it'll have the kind of a flood issue you saw with Isabel. Maybe some small water rise as the storm approaches, but then the winds will actually swing the other way, and you'll see a lowering of water levels there. Not so fortunate for Delaware Bay. The areas from north of Dover all the way down to Bethany, and then, of course, into Ocean City, we have a high probability of exceeding 4 feet in storm surge. That, coupled with the waves, a lot of beach damage, and any property at low level is going to be damaged also. And further up the coast, we're still looking at about the same issue on storm surge when you get up into the Long Island Sound and the New York metropolitan area. Our forecast is going to carry from the Hurricane Center a broad forecast in that range of 4 to 8 feet. Your local offices, your local forecast offices will have detailed information to pinpoint the problem areas along your coast and in the bays and rivers and whatnot, because there's a lot of variability in there within that 4 to 8 foot range. Next slide, please. And of course, the rainfall, and it's starting to show that now. As the storm moves northward, the rainfall shifts from being mostly in the northeast quadrant of the storm to actually in the northwest, because it's coming under the influence of the weather features that are pulling it off to the north. So we're expecting now a swath of 5 to 10 inches of rain right across the mid-Atlantic, centered over the Philadelphia metropolitan area and then into the New York metropolitan area and the western part of New England. All of these areas have had excessive rain in the past, so the ground's saturated, and we'll have issues with flash flooding, and we're probably going to have some issues with river flooding before it's all over. Craig, I'm going to turn it to you.
Thanks, Bill. As Bill talked about the various hazards, I want to kind of key on a couple points. When we talk about category of hurricane, that does not explain all of the risk. You deal with basically 4 principal risks with a hurricane: the high winds, storm surge, and these 2 are very much tied to the category which describes how strong the winds are at the center of circulation. But also, as Bill talked about, rainfall and tornadoes, and they are not tied to the category of storm. So even though this may be a Category 1 hurricane, rainfall amounts are not tied to Category storm. It is due to the size and the forward speed of the storm. Some of our most devastating floods have occurred in tropical storms. The other thing is the tornadoes are going to be very quick, as Bill said. These will not be on the ground very long. They won't be the type of tornadoes we saw this spring, but they can still be very devastating. That's why we're asking people that are outside the evacuation zones during the storm to stay inside, stay away from exterior walls and windows, interior areas, just like you would prepare for tornadoes, but you're going to be there for a much longer period of time during the storm, so make sure you bring your supplies with you. The other key issue here is in the immediate aftermath of the storm, as the Secretary says, we're going to start the response phase in North Carolina as Irene moves north. The best thing people can do is stay home, stay inside. A lot of people like to get out and travel about. It's very hazardous with down power lines, trees down, plus the responders and the utility crews don't need to get behind you when they're trying to go help. So in the aftermath of the storm, unfortunately, we've seen as many people injured and lose their lives after the storm came through because it's still very dangerous. And then finally, yesterday, we had announced over our blog that we had released one of our apps for Android. And I just want to show you right now that we are out with information coming out over the app. And again, what's good about this is it has the information that if you do lose connectivity, it has preparedness information about what to do during and after hurricanes as well as other hazards. And again, this is for the Android. It's on the market. If you won't go to it, it is the official FEMA app that's out there. So if you go to blog.fema.gov, it will give you the link to that for your Android devices. And again, the iPhone and BlackBerry apps are coming soon, but we had this one ready, so we wanted to get it out for the hurricane. The other part we talk about is the team. And again, as we talk about responding to this disaster, it's not just what government at all levels is doing, it's about what our volunteer agencies are doing. So with us today, we have Gail McGovern of the Red Cross and Major Hood of the Salvation Army. And I'd like to turn it over to Gail now to talk about what our volunteer agencies are doing to support our citizens.
Thanks, Administrator Fugate, and thank you also, Secretary Napolitano. We appreciate your leadership. Our organizations are very tightly linked. They continue to work well together, and we really appreciate the partnership. We're now in the middle of what could be one of the largest responses that the Red Cross operations have had in recent memory. There are a number of evacuations, and that reinforces the serious nature and how far-reaching the storm is. We have operations in more than a dozen states. Our priority right now is sheltering, and last night we had 13,000 people in our shelters from the states that were evacuated. We have nearly 150 shelters open right now. We're preparing to open dozens more as the storm continues to go north, and many of them are being opened as we speak. If you need the location of a shelter, you should go to redcross.org. There is an app on our site that will show you where our shelters are, where the nearest one is to you. We also have a brand new app on the iPhone that also is a shelter map. We've already had 15,000 downloads since the storm began, so we expect that to grow. Like every other agency at times like this, the phones are probably going to start ringing off the hook. So if you do need to get in touch with us, the internet is your best bet. Also, local media will be covering where the nearest shelters are, and you can listen for that as well. We also encourage people to register on Safe and Well. That's an application on our website, and it's a way to tell family members that you're out of harm's way and that you're okay. And this storm is still ongoing. People in the Northeast still need to take precautions. You've heard over and over again, if officials tell you evacuate, I'm going to say it again. It's really important to heed those warnings. They're serious. And if you're not in an area that's been evacuated, make sure you have supplies on hand. We ask that everybody have an emergency kit that has food and water for up to 72 hours, radios, that are battery operated, flashlights, lots of extra batteries, your personal medications, your kid's teddy bear, the stuff that you need to survive for 72 hours. We are putting the full force of the American Red Cross behind this operation. That means we have thousands of volunteers that are already hitting the East Coast. We have 2/3 of our fleet either on the East Coast or heading towards the East Coast. These are emergency response vehicles. This is going to last a long time, so those vehicles will be there to go through the communities, offering food, relief items, hygiene kits, and the like. We have tens of thousands prepackaged meals on site. We're able to gen up to be able to feed about 1 million meals a day. And part of the reason that we can do this is because of the wonderful partnerships that we have with other nonprofits and the faith-based organizations. People have asked what it is that they can do to help those that are not in the affected area. My guess is this is going to be a costly operation, so donations are extremely welcome, regardless of the size. They'd be gratefully received. And also, there are a number of blood drives that had to be canceled in these areas that are affected by the storm, so we suspect there might be a blood shortage. So if you are eligible to donate blood, and you can do so, you can also give the gift, the life-saving gift of blood. And speaking of our wonderful partnerships, it's my privilege to introduce Major George Hood, who is from the Salvation Army, also a great partner of ours.
Thank you very much, and good morning to all of you. I'm actually here filling two roles, and I want to define those two roles for you. I represent the Salvation Army as the Chief Communications Officer, but today I'm also representing a network of wonderful voluntary organizations that we refer to as VOAD. National Voluntary Organizations Active in Disasters is a network of 50 different nonprofit organizations, each extremely gifted with a particular skill. And throughout the year, not just when a disaster arrives, but 365 days out of the year, this group of organizations who are committed to saving lives and rebuilding lives after devastation work on how we can best respond collaboratively whenever a disaster strikes. Voluntary organization has been mobilized very effectively thus far with this particular hurricane. And some preliminary numbers, one of the agencies are the Southern Baptist, and the Southern Baptist men are well known for their ability to cook wonderful meals. And already they have 131 kitchens on standby with an average capacity of meals of 130,000 meals on a daily basis. So there's all kinds of that type of work that will take place, pre-planned, highly coordinated as a support infrastructure for FEMA as we work together. Both the Red Cross and the Salvation Army are active members of VOAD. Now, on a Salvation Army standpoint, let me say that we have been actively engaged since Irene came on the radar screen. And the reason being is that we have responsibility for Puerto Rico and some of the islands of the Caribbean. And I would remind you to look back a few days as this slow-moving storm continues to work. We have been dealing with major issues on the islands of the Caribbean, Puerto Rico, and the Dominican Republic, and we have been reported, the last report I had, which was yesterday, 800,000 individuals with no power on those islands. And so feeding and sheltering and spiritual care is all being implemented still on those regions. In the early days of preparation, we put command teams in Florida, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, all positioned in safe ranges so that when we understand where the impact is most going to be, we will be mobilized and quick to respond. We currently have in North Carolina the capacity of 300 individual canteens, feeding canteens that can serve 1,500 meals a day, and mobile kitchens that can prepare up to 150,000 meals. So our specialty in these kind of situations is mass care, mostly feeding, doing some sheltering. 3 shelters are operating under our auspices in North Carolina, and they tell me that breakfast began this morning at the first crack of dawn. So that kind of work is going on. We're now positioning Florida assets moving further up the coast, and we have put a large asset base at a Salvation Army summer camp, usually used for children in the summer, is now housing people in eastern Pennsylvania who will be mobilized in whichever direction on the East Coast that they are most needed as the definition of this storm continues to take shape. And we agree and have continually announced that this is a serious storm, and we are putting all of our assets in place. We have approached it on the Salvation Army viewpoint as a national disaster, which gives us access to all of the resources from all 50 states across America, and we are mobilizing volunteers and those assets in the key strategic areas so that as the storm moves through, we will know precisely where to send those assets to be able to respond. Our contribution to this will be mass feeding, some sheltering, long-term case management, and emotional and spiritual care. Those are the things that we feel that we do extremely well, and we are able to function in this partnership with the Red Cross, with FEMA, and through the group of the 50 organizations that represent VOHAN. Thank you very much.
We'll now go to some questions from folks in the room.
For Administrator Fugate or for Secretary Napolitano, do all the states have everything they need? And in reviewing and coordinating with them, have you seen any gaps in preparations or in possible response, things that you're anticipating, and any gaps in the state planning levels?
Right. We've been in regular touch with the states. None of them have reported any unmet needs right now. But again, we're really at the beginning of this storm response. We're just basically at the end of the preparation phase, and we're not yet into response and recovery. So we'll work with the states as they do their assessments and see what damages the storm actually has caused in their areas. Craig?
And again, the Secretary's been in contact with the governors. Yesterday, the President was in contact with the governors, with the Secretary. I think it's we move resources to get ready, but until we actually get the impacts, we're not going to know how bad areas are being hit. And again, North Carolina is being hit now, so we're getting some idea with large-scale power outages that there will be requests there. We already had supplies and teams there. So this will, as the Secretary says, as we start getting the impacts, that will better define what areas and what kind of assistance may be needed. But we were anticipating some of this, and again, it's the Salvation Army and Red Cross. We're talking about a lot of different organizations, Coast Guard, other elements within DHS have been moving resources and people just being prepared, but not really having a fixed site yet until we get the reports of damages and ask from the governors.
Yeah.
The storm is now a Cat 1. It's been weakened to some degree. Do we expect it to weaken some more, or do we expect it to pick up strength? Is there any assessment on that point?
Well, again, Cat 1 means you're at 79, 80 miles per hour. And as I said earlier, I would not advise people to focus too much on Category 1, 2, or 3. If you're in a hurricane, you're in a hurricane, and it's a big deal. The other thing about this storm is we have a huge expanse of associated tropical force winds extending well over 200 miles beyond the actual hurricane area. So you've got the combination, the hurricane, the expanded wind area. As Craig mentioned, we have some associated tornadoes. And that's kind of the formation of this storm right now. If it changes or as it changes, the National Hurricane Center and FEMA will give current updates. Craig, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, I think Bill could probably tell you about the forecast and what it would look like as far as strengthening or weakening. Bill?
We don't see it strengthening anymore. The proximity to land.
You've been listening to a live news conference from FEMA headquarters in Washington, led by Secretary of Homeland Security Janet Napolitano. Even though the storm Irene is weakening, still a dangerous storm, going to cause a lot of problems for some time to come.
And we're starting to see some of those problems now. We're getting reports of power outages. We're getting reports in Fayetteville and Wake Electric in Wake Forest, and we're also getting reports of trees and storm debris. Gilbert Bates is live in Sampson County with more on some of that storm debris. Gilbert?
Hey, Barbara, tell you what a difference about a half hour and 30 miles made. I didn't even have a jacket on. I was standing there in an undershirt in Fayetteville with not an issue. We drove about 30 miles to Clinton, and all heck broke loose, basically. We're in the weather, and we did see and feel the wind as we were moving in. We're in downtown Clinton right now. This is College Street, and as you travel around downtown, there's a lot of power outages. Just about all of the traffic lights are out down here. This is a big oak tree that's in front of this business here. Let me take a look and see exactly which business is it. We've got crews that are actually cutting this tree down. This is Black, Chestnut, and Johnson certified public accountants. So you guys, if you're watching, your tree's gone, it's down, and we've got workers here who are actually trying to cut this thing up and get it out of the way. The problem with this tree, and you can get an idea of how big it is, I'm 5'10", and look at how big the root is here and how it has knocked down the power lines that are down here. You can see the power lines here. I've talked with Public Works folks, and I'm pretty close to this only because they told me that the power was gone. So we're in pretty good shape here, and I know that I'm safe. We wouldn't get this close if we weren't. That's the big deal for anyone who is coming out right now in downtown Clinton. There are power lines down all around town, and you don't know if there's power to them. So we've talked with a lot of the folks here who say stay away from them, and the best thing to always do is assume that the power is there before you start prancing around like I'm prancing around here. Now I'm able to do this. I want to get over here, and I see Jeff. Jeff, come on down here for a second. He's in charge of the Public Works here in Clinton. Let's get a sense of what's going on here. Your last name, because I can't pronounce it.
Jeff Brugden Hill.
What's the conditions and what's going on here in Clinton?
Well, we've had some damage. Obviously, you can see it. We feel real fortunate, you know, having Berthas and Frans and Floyds. You know, I feel like we're real fortunate. We've got some inconveniences and we have some utility problems. And it's just, you know, the key is just to be safe and have the workers safe and have the public safe. With the utility companies, make sure the power's out of these trees before we start removing them. But I got to say we've been real fortunate.
Let's bring you around this way here a little bit, because you've got crews working on this right now. What are they trying to do here?
Well, we're being real careful, because you probably wouldn't notice unless you were looking, but that next pole there is broken at the top, and the transformer is hanging there.
Here, wait a minute. Let me let Lou show you that. What we're doing here, you're talking about this tree right here, this pole, this one right here. Let me get over here so you can give me a little play-by-play on this.
Well, you know, I got to get the guys out from under there. You got a hanging limb in the tree that you can't cut underneath it, even though you're wearing salt. You know, that's a dead man hanging there. It can fall on your workers, so we're going to take it down to the excavator. We have to leave the wire loaded with that weight because we don't want this pole to spring back, because that pole down there is broken at the top at the transformer. So that transformer could fall off the top of that pole. Now, there's a lot of things going on.
Is there power still in that pole up there?
There is no power down here. We have very close communication with Mr. Billy Cottle from Progress Energy, and he assures us we're safe working here from a power point of view, and he will not. It's going to be a good while before any power is restored down here.
I was told about 10,000 folks as this thing's getting ready to snap. Let's move back a little bit, Lou, because I don't want to become the news here. Well, Lou, you could keep taking some pictures of that thing happening right there. Okay, she's going to get out the way too.
Tony.
Hey, Tony.
Tony.
That's going to snap there, Tony. We don't want anything on live TV here. Yeah. We've been told about 10,000 folks without power in Sampson County. Is that correct?
I wouldn't know that. I'm not with the utility company. I mean, Progress Energy know that far better than I know there's a good number of people out in Clinton.
Okay. What's your advice to folks right now?
Stay home. You know, the wind's still blowing. The only reason we're working here is we have no other overhead trees that are threatening the workers. The tree that's here is down, is in a primary road, so we want to get it clear. But I wouldn't have our guys under standing trees right now, because additional ones could fall.
It's my understanding you got another big one on Main Street as well.
Yeah, in the historic district. That was an area that was hit really hard during Fran. We lost several homes over there during Fran, and there's a tree that's a good bit larger than this one laying completely across the road, and it has wires in it as well. And we're waiting on communication with Progress Energy and about when we can go remove that tree.
All right, Jeff, well, we appreciate you giving us an update on what's happening here in Clinton. Again, we're advising folks to stay home and stay out of the way from the workers who are down here. Wind is still whipping pretty good here. John and Barbara, I guess you still have me here because we've been moving around an awful lot. Are we still good?
Yes, we still got you.
Well, we had an opportunity here to wipe that lens off there, Lynn. The wind is whipping pretty good here in downtown Clinton. Again, if you don't have to come out, don't do that. What a tremendous difference, again, 30 minutes and 30 miles makes in the terms of how this storm is hitting. And we know it's a matter of where it tracks. And based on where it's tracked right now, this Sampson County is getting hit pretty good. No reports of any flooding, though, is what we're told, though, John Barber.
All right, Gilbert Bay is live in Sampson County. Thank you. And this reason right here is exactly why the governor and other state officials want people to stay in, because you never know what could be lurking around the corner if you get out.
And we have a sad note here. This is from Nashville. Emergency officials in Nash County say a man was crushed to death outside his home by a large limb blown down during high winds from Hurricane Irene. So that is a fatality there in Nash County. Also want to let you know from Rocky Mount Public Works, they have trees and limbs in the roadways. 2 blocks of Falls Road are closed just west of Gray Street. The westbound lane of 1200 Bethlehem Road, a bunch of roads are closed or blocked because of debris. Stay home, they say.
That's right.